core of the crew here today. And we're happy to see all of you, and hopefully a few more will roll in before the morning's out. So we're gonna have a compact but very meaningful morning today, and we're going to start it off with my friend Paul Plant, who's going to talk about the digital imperative for SMEs. He's got a lot to say about what it's going to take to really get more small businesses online. So Paul, come on up, and join me in welcoming Paul.
Morning. More than I expected to see. Okay. Well, I'm going to just perhaps recap on some of the things that have already been said by others. I thought yesterday was very interesting. And a lot of the messages that came out of yesterday you're going to hear again this morning, particularly the need for simplicity to make the jobs of our small business customers a lot easier, to try and demystify and uncomplicate this ever disruptive and ever complicating world in which we live, to try and give the small business back more time to do what he set out originally to do with his company, and also to pick up on something that Sandy said at the start of yesterday, which is, the need for this industry to collaborate more, and particularly the supply side of this industry, I think needs to come together to make it easier for publishers to do their job. So I don't think you're going to hear too many things that are new in here. And here's perhaps the reason why we need to, declutter this world in which we live in, because, I talked yesterday afternoon about the decade that we've just gone through of massive disruption, both in terms of the life of the SME, but also the disruption that we've gone through as an industry, and, you look at every single publisher on the planet, everyone's doing something different right now, whereas 10 years ago, we all pretty much did exactly the same thing, and I think there's a strong case for coming back together and to collaborate more and to try and at least simplify or at least agree on what should be the core offering that we take out to market to give to small businesses. Because if you can see here, the average consumer or the typical consumer has now got so many different places to go, to research a purchase, and still the most favored one is to ask a friend and that kind of stuff. And yet we as an industry are now having to take out in our sales kit, almost like an Italian-sized restaurant menu, of offerings of products, and we have to try and make those, into simple bundles or simple packages that not only salespeople can find easier to sell, but more specifically make them easier for the customer to understand and buy. And I work with lots of SMEs for the last 7-8 years. I've worked in the incubator space with Telefonica in the UK, with Telstra in Australia, and it doesn't matter where you do your research, you will see these comments coming out in France, in Italy, in the UK, in Australia, and North America. Right now we have a very, very complicated product stack that is not always easy for our customers to buy, and not always easy for our salespeople to sell. That's one of the reasons why I think we have the churn that we have in this industry. People still see the Yellow Pages brand, the fingers, as a trusted media source, yet fewer and fewer of them are buying from us, so there has to be a reason behind that. And I just want to pick up on the research that Charles shared with us yesterday in terms of where the modern business owner spends his time. I'll just get all this up together. For some reason, they didn't like the picture for customers. I don't know why that is. But the average small business spends most of his time either managing his staff, collecting money, managing suppliers, or trying to get his head around marketing and advertising. It's not easy. And that same piece of research hold on, we've missed a slide here. There's a slide missing there, but never mind. Okay. So I'll tell you what's on the slide that's missing. In Charlie's research, it says that the average SME only spends a third of his time doing what he actually sets out to do in the morning, and that is, i.e., build houses, lay roofs, landscape, whatever his chosen field of endeavor as an SME. Only 1/3 of his working day is spent doing that. The other half, 2/3, is spent doing what I just showed you, managing his staff, managing his budgets, managing his bill payments, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's incumbent on us to get our heads around what is it that we take to market? What's the offer that we take? What is it that we sell? To go right back to something Panana said on the very first presentation. What are the must-haves in our product stack, and what are the nice-to-haves? Because my challenge is, and I work with publishers all around the world, literally, all around the world. And I still see a lot of stuff in people's kit bags that are what I would call nice products, when we haven't really got our heads around what is the core basic offering for what the SME really needs right now. So it begs this question: what is our core proposition, and how do we simplify the message? They would be the two questions I pose to this industry, and they're no different to the same two questions that I've probably posed at these conferences for the last 15 years. If you do a lot of research around SMEs, and I'm sorry these slides haven't formatted well. They're great on a Mac, by the way. But if you ask an SME, most SME research, most SMEs will give you 3 or 4 simple priorities in terms of what they want from the people they deal with. Most MSMEs still want either the phone to ring, a click to their website, or footfall across the threshold of their premises. That is their number one need. Don't let anybody kid you that it's any different. They want to deal with a company that's easy to deal with. Make it easy for them. Package this stuff in a way that makes it easy for me to buy. And they want that from a trusted local advisor. That's the role. That's why we still exist. We still have warm and trusted brands that people still trust. And more in this day and age where we live in what I call the prove-it era of media, we have to provide evidence and proof that what it is that we're giving them works. James showed you the staircase yesterday, and it all starts with presence. I think it is an imperative that people have to perform and exist in the world of digital, but it all starts with a presence. James talked about web card, whether it's a web card, a website, a landing page, whatever. You can't play in this game, unless you've got some kind of presence or footprint in the digital era. And yet I see a lot of publishers, selling products way up at the top end of that staircase, before they're even, selling the basic stuff properly. And if you follow that continuum, it all starts with basic connectivity, building your content online, establishing a means for your customers to contact you, starting to trade with them. Then you get into, relationship management and community. That's the sequence and the order that really we should be focusing our product stacks. So it begs the question: what is the role of the front? The interface with the customer today. What is that? What is the true role of the salesman? Is it to sell? Is it to serve? And I know if my old mucker, Mr. Polachek, was here, he'd be saying increasingly these days in this industry, it's about how you service your customers that's becoming the differentiator in terms of what it is that you sell them in the first place. But there's certainly a big graying of the border as to where sales finishes and service starts. And certainly if you look at, so local, another company that I work with, they have customer-facing people all the way through their organization, from not just point of sale, but all of their back office is customer-facing. They don't do any outsourcing whatsoever. And Jean-Pierre Remy, who's just left there as their CEO after 10 years, he will say, as far as he's concerned, the sale doesn't end when the salesman walks out with the order. In some respects, the sale is only just then starting, because it's how you fulfill it and the customer's experience of what it is that you've sold him that really determines whether he's going to buy from you next year or not. So it really, begs the question whether, whether your salespeople is just out there to sell and is a revenue machine. I would challenge quite strongly that that's not really what we employ our salespeople to do these days. But the first thing a salesperson should be out there to do is to build a relationship with your customer. For me, the R's of, revenue. Revenue comes to you as a consequence of doing something else in this day and age, in my opinion. And that is, if you build a good relationship, then, you focus them on retention, then ultimately you have a long-term relationship that delivers you long-term revenue and long-term income. Don't focus on the revenue to start with, is really where what I'm saying. I think this slide says it all. Gone are the days where we would go in, pitch our product, do 95% of the talking, and most of that would be objection handling. We now live in an age where if you're going to build a relationship with a customer, you've got to listen to him. As it says in the Bible, we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should use them in that proportion. And this game is a listening game these days. The businesses that do best in the digital arena are the ones who listen and know their customers better than anybody else. And I hope this slide formats pretty well. It's quite a complicated one. But if you just look at the old world of how we sold in this space, we would go in, we would try and extract a need out of the customer fairly early on in the call. And once we got that need, we're thinking, yes, we've got him, we can close him. And we'd then spend another half an hour telling him how fantastic our product was, and then try and hammer him to the wall and extract as much blood out of him as we possibly could, overcoming objection after objection after objection. That's no longer fit for purpose in the modern arena. We now live in an era where, if you look at the proportion of time spent, in a typical sales call, most of that call is you listening to him or her telling you about how they work, how they interact with their customers, how they market themselves currently, what type of inquiries they want more of. Only then, only when you understand him or her, their business, can you then start to talk about what is the right solution for them. And then if you've done your job properly, the close is a very small, but still important piece that comes right at the end of the sale. And then if you compare that approach to the old world, it's much more customer-centric, far less prescriptive, much more conversational. It's predicated around building a relationship rather than just around extracting money. The customer does most of the talking in the new world, as opposed to the salesman doing most of the talking. And the emphasis is not about objection handling. The emphasis is about adding value. And customer centricity has to extend to the back office, be under no illusion, and you see it more and more these days. The attributes of a company that make you stay with them are how they service you, as opposed to the basic product itself. And in this arena, in my view, that means every touch point, every time you deal with that customer, every opportunity you take to speak to him is a chance for you to add value and enhance and build that client relationship. Everything, from the way you sell to him, from the way you fulfill him. And, we talked, someone on the first day talked about NPS, and there's increasing numbers of businesses in this arena, are now using NPS. I did a lot of work when I first left Yale. I went and did a lot of work with Telefonica O2. And O2, the mobile network in the UK, certainly the biggest mobile network in Europe. Every single person in O2, from the chief executive all the way down to the person who sweeps the floor, is measured on customer retention. In fact, if you don't hit your customer retention target, then 50% of your bonus is pretty much gone. You don't earn money in O2 unless you retain customers. In fact, they have this lovely approach that they call the Hotel California approach. You can check in any time you like, but you can never leave. Once you become a customer of O2, they will do their best to keep you forever. And if you look at O2, bearing in mind it's a pretty high churn industry, they have customer retention of over 90%, which is phenomenal in a mobile business. That's probably why they're one of the six best companies in the world to work for. But it's true, reward and incentive schemes are built around retention, around customer satisfaction. Yeah, it changes the culture inside an organization when you do that. And of course, all of that is supported by world-class business intelligence, CRM. Every single touch point in the company, knows the last person who spoke with that customer and what was said and what was exchanged. So we can do it. And I think there's enough intelligence and enough good minds in this industry to know that we can do it. I've seen, as all the churn has taken place, we've resorted to cost cutting, we've resorted to outsourcing and offshoring. And it's in my opinion, it's a very dangerous thing to do. As I say, we're in an industry that's built around millions of trusted, loyal, local relationships. And in my opinion, it's damn hard to outsource a relationship business. It really is. And I've quoted it many times, and I'll quote it again. One of the big differences when my regime left Yale in 10 years ago, a new regime came in and thought, well, we'll just outsource everything. And at the same time, I went to work for SoLocal in France, where they had completely the opposite approach, and they said we keep everything in-house as well as we can treat them inside. And you look at the retention levels. SoLocal had a customer retention level in excess of 85%. At Yale, ours dropped from 60 to nearly 50. So we were losing half our customers. So outsourcing, be very, very careful when you outsource. It carries an enormous amount of risk. So, to summarize, and I haven't really talked a lot about product, but I think there are, if you take the Venn diagram of three concentric circles and where they overlap in terms of product, sales, and service, you probably get the best fit-for-purpose media companies in the world today. If you look at the product, has to be best in class, needs to be really compelling in the eyes of the customer, attractive to buy and sensibly priced, providing access to a broad network of usage, leads, call it whatever you want, but fish where the fish are. Make sure your customer's message is where his customers are likely to be looking for him. Has to be anchored in online these days. I'm still, even though yesterday I spoke about in 10 years, half the companies in Europe are no longer selling print. I still believe you should sell print where there is a market for print. Okay, but these days, certainly our future, has to be anchored in online. And ROI measurement and transparency has to be built into every single thing you do. From the point of view of how you sell, very simple. You need trusted, knowledgeable, local media experts. Make sure they know what the digital world is. Make sure they know the competitive landscape in each of your territories. Skill them properly. Make sure that they have, the best-in-class point-of-sales tools, and equip them. The best prepared salespeople are the ones who tend to be the most successful. So arm them well with the best kit. And make sure they're relationship-focused as opposed to revenue-focused. And of course, in your back office, make sure you give your customer a world-class experience. Make sure he wants to come back and do business with you next year. Make your processes slick and responsive, with good business intelligence and good CRM. And build loyalty. You want your customers sticking with you. Sticky customers are happy customers, or vice versa. And to finish with, my favorite quote, but I live and breathe by this quote. I say it to every single business I work with, whether it's in this industry or not. The most successful companies in the world are those who know, what it's like to be one of their own customers. Yeah, so learn to live and walk in your own customers' shoes. And that's a great mantra to live any business by. And I wish you all well. It's been a great conference. Thanks very much.
Paul, why don't you stay there and we'll do a little Q&A. Questions, they're more than welcome to stick their hand up and we'll get a microphone to you. But just a few things I want to talk about. Talk about leads. There's a point of view that leads are sort of becoming a bit of a commodity, and there's sort of a race to the bottom with leads, and that just providing leads is not going to be a high-margin business in the future. So how do you think about that?
I agree. Yeah, I'm not saying it's all about leads, but
okay.
You ask most businesses what they want more of than anything else.
I was just misrepresenting what you said.
They want customers. Yeah. But I don't think leads are commoditized yet. I think you'll know that the minute that leads become a commodity, you'll start to buy them on Amazon. So I do agree. In terms of the core offering that we sell, it is becoming much of a muchness, regardless of who and where you buy it from. And you can see that in every single market in the world, because the number of people selling media solutions in every single country, there's hundreds of them. You do a Google search for, I want to buy a website in London. And I can guarantee you there'll be at least 40, 50 pages of results. You go back 10 years and do a Google search and I want to buy a Yellow Pages ad, there would be probably one result or two. Yeah, so it's a competitive space. Right. But I suppose it comes back to, what is the commodity? Some could say the website itself has become a commodity.
Sure. Yeah, I guess the point is, what beyond leads do you have? I mean, what's the next level? I mean, assuming you're still providing leads, what's the next thing that actually?
Well, I'm a firm believer, and you and I have had this conversation as we have with Neil. I think, I do agree that these days publishers have to sell a mix of stuff, and that mix of stuff has to be, advertising and marketing products and business efficiency products.
Okay. Sandy?
Well, thank you, Paul. This was enlightening. And a question for you. You started out saying that as publishers, we're doing things differently and that you're making a call to come together and agree on a core offering. Can you expound on that a little bit? And how would we stay competitive with service being our differentiator? And I'm thinking of shiny new toys that pop up, including several startups in this conference even, and just how does that all look?
Yep. Well, I think one of the ways you can add value certainly in terms of the core offering, one thing we have to move away from, and more people are moving away from it, is to see the customer much more frequently than once a year. I mean, if all we are doing, or any publishers who are still just seeing their customer once a year, I think you're missing out, without question. As I said, there's now a plethora, of, corner shop, SEO houses, design houses. You must certainly see it in your business. And the minute you're not in the street, someone else is knocking on that customer's door. And oddly enough, it comes to a question, sack the juggler. It comes back to certain questions someone asked me the other night about, what's the role of, premise sales, because we were talking about, my old company, has hardly any premise sales people these days. There is still an argument, a very strong argument for every company to have a physical presence in every market. Yeah, not only because you need to be able to be the eyes and ears to see what's going on in that market, but you need to be able to respond. Whenever the boards go up, when a customer goes out of business and the boards go up, it's only going to be a matter of time before there's a planning application on that window, and you want to be able to get in there first before somebody else does. So you do need to be the eyes and ears. So my first response to your question would be, keep people in the marketplace. Keep visible in the marketplace, and And where you have got existing customers there, make an excuse, have a reason to go and see them once a quarter. Crikey, I started out in this game in local newspapers. I saw most of my customers every week for 52 weeks.
That's great, Paul, but isn't the future about having your customers find you? It's more so than today.
Is the future about?
Having the customer find you more so than it has been in the past.
How do they find us as a publisher?
Yeah, but sales efficiency has got to become an imperative in the future because, premise sales reps, the cost of sales in this industry.
Yeah, I'm not advocating having a sales rep, 365
Of course, and that trend is already well underway, but I guess I sort of see a model in the future where it's a lot more content-driven, a lot more they find you for the right reason at the right time. There has to be more of that in the industry, I think.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, I'm not sure too many of us have made it that obvious that we have moved away from the old world into the new world. And again, in that same study that you showed yesterday, where we talked about, selling business efficiency solutions through a media seller.
Right.
Only 1/3 of respondents said that they would buy
right.
CRM type product.
Right, but also those types of solutions are sold very much differently than media has been sold.
Yeah, exactly. So, to my point entirely. So have we done a good enough job of showing the world that we are adaptive and responsive, and we're not just a media sales, we're not just a lead generation business?
We have another question.
Hi, Paul. Here.
One and then two.
Paul, first a comment, I think your formatting challenges when we had that, we could see that leads was well formatted, whereas easy to work with was not. So I think it's a question of us listening more to the customer. But my question really comes from where I look at it. I'm the outsourced service provider, and you made your point, your view very clear on outsourcing. My view about that is I don't think it's so clearly black and white, especially with the kind of cost pressures, the new products that you need to focus on, a good mixture of using services where it's not directly a touch point with the customer.
Absolutely.
And keeping the touch point with the customer on shore is the right balance.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not against outsourcing. What I am against is outsourcing things that you consider to be core to your business. Yeah, things that are core to the relationship between you and your SME. You cherish them dearly. But at the end of the day, I'm not against. A good example, and again, something we were talking about with somebody last night. I always remember. I spent 4 years in acquisitions and for BT when we acquired Yellow Book and 93 other companies in the US. And I always remember at the time we acquired Yellow Book, Yell in the UK, we had an IT function of over 300 people, producing 100 directories. Yellow Book were producing 250 directories with an IT team of 16 people. They outsourced the whole of their IT function to Computer Center, and they were far more efficient. Certainly that managed on a much more tighter cost base than we were at Yale. But that's simply because at that time, a lot of the IT involved in running the business could have been done a lot cheaper outside. We were just one of those guilty ex-telco businesses who thought we do best. We've got bell-shaped heads, so we do things best. So we have to build it in-house. So I'm not against. So to your point, I'm not against outsourcing. All I'm saying is you just be careful what it is that you outsource, and where you have the opportunity to enhance the relationship, then I would keep that in-house.
Another question?
Yeah, Paul, as somewhat of somebody that has been doing this for a very long time, and still look great, by the way, for being around for so long. Mate, the question, you talk about enhancement offerings. We've talked about it over the last sort of few days, but what is your point of view in relation to the diversification or the expansion of the directory organisations into being transactional? We talk about adding better SEO offerings and all of this sort of thing, but what is your opinion relating to moving into that space rather than getting better at what we currently do in a way?
Well, two answers to that. First of all, I think we've all learned our lesson that we can't do everything ourselves. Yeah, and so it leads into the second piece of it. You either partner with best-in-class partners to expand your offering, or where you've got, dollars to invest, go out and acquire or do JVs, with people. I think if we are going to stand for something new and different, rather than adapt a brand, go out and acquire brands. A lot of people have talked, there's not been a huge amount of talk about it the last couple of days, but verticalization has been something we've talked about a lot, in these conferences over the last 2 or 3 years. And if I look at SoLocal and what they've done, they've just gone out and acquired, lots of other brands in different markets and verticals and been very, very successful.
Well, and Zap Group's another example of that as well.
So there are many different ways to skin the cat, and there's many different ways, I think, to evolve this industry. And I think we're all pretty much, certainly once bitten, twice shy. We don't want to keep trying to build things ourselves anymore. And that's why I totally agree with the point that Sandy made yesterday morning. We have got to learn to collaborate more. We've got to learn to work together. And I think by working more in partnership, we can expand this industry, pretty successfully. There's a lot of bright brains around this space, and I'm sure if we pulled them more and worked more for the greater good, rather than just worrying about looking at our own navel all the time, then I'm sure we could make this a very successful industry still in the future. I'm convinced of that. I have to be. I've been in it for 41 years, for Christ's sake.
Sooner or later, we're going to get it right. Okay, we'll have to end it there. Thanks, Paul.
Cheers, Charlie.